Shri Sai Ram. I offer my humble pranams at Bhagwan's lotus feet. In the past few months, I went through a phase where, for want of better words, I would like to say, I got bored of spirituality. I got bored. When I say bored of spirituality, I don't know the exact definition of spirituality, but I definitely know the meaning and definition of boredom. So I got bored of what I consider as spirituality. So my spirituality is thinking about Swami, writing articles about Swami, making videos on Swami, giving discourses, giving lectures. All these I consider as part of my spiritual package, and I got bored. And I even received a few mails and messages asking what happened. No articles, no videos. And I would write some response because I could not write, hey, I'm bored doing it. I'm bored. So that really seriously set me thinking, and possibly this break from even satsang hall talks for 2 months. I was really thinking, what do you do if you get bored of spirituality? Why am I getting bored of spirituality? Have I understood spirituality wrong? Is there a thing like this? When Swami was physically around, possibly I would have written a letter to Swami, sought an explanation, studied him intensely and minutely, looking for any indication, looked forward for dreams in which Swami might possibly explain and give a solution. But now I don't know. Somehow the dreams have also reduced. Swami is physically not available. I still write a few letters now and then. I write it and keep it in my own altar. I tell Swami, you can read it anyway. It gives me some kind of relief, but I don't get the answers. So I think it is a time to just go deep within and keep contemplating and hope an answer arises. And this also is a continuous learning process. As of now, I feel I have an answer, which might change a month from now. So this is whatever that version that I'm delivering now. I wouldn't say that it's a comprehensive answer, nor will I say that this is the answer. I'm just sharing my own experience and my thoughts. So while thinking about this, the entire structure that came about was like, when I first saw Swami, I felt mesmerized. I was thrilled, and I'm sure many who have seen Swami physically will remember their first darshan of Bhagwan. Everybody remembers, whoever has had, mostly at least everybody. Unless you are too small, you had your first darshan as a 3-year-old. Then you will remember the first darshan that you remember in your memory. That one you will remember very vividly. You may say that, as a 3-year-old, my parents brought me to Swami. I don't know all that. But I remember when I was 9-year-old, I remember. Because that is my first conscious darshan of Swami. So too, I also remember. And I remember having that first darshan under the tree in Sai Ram shed, where 200 people were considered a crowd. Swami would come to the live bhajan singing going on. Very beautiful, very nice. But you know what? If you ask me what was my 15th darshan, I don't remember. I don't remember. And I'm sure that's the case with everybody. I remember my first darshan, and then subsequently I remember all the other darshans which were slightly different from, or they were unique, or something special happened. Swami patted me on my cheek, or Swami materialized a ring for me. Then I remember. But if I happen to be somebody who has received 1522 pats on my cheek from Swami, then possibly I remember the first pat on my cheek. If you ask me what was the 125th, I don't know. Now, I haven't received that many pats, but I'm just saying that's how it is. I met a person who has got 200 interviews with Bhagwan. And as a person who has got one interview with Swami, I was like in awe of this person. But the amount of notes I have got of that one interview with Swami, this person doesn't have for even 30 interviews with Swami. Because possibly the same effect, whatever we call this effect. The first interview is memorable, you remember every word, everything. And then 35th interview, I don't know. See, Swami told us in the interview, I don't know whether it was in 92 or 94. How you don't know whether it was 92 or 94? Because I've got 100 interviews, I don't know. I don't know when it was, but this is what Swami said. That is more important. There was something unique that Swami said, so you remember. In fact, when I came to Prashanti Nilayam and had darshan, I witnessed something very, very interesting, which made me feel very jealous. We would all be seated and waiting for when Swami will come. 5 minutes before Swami will come, 5 minutes before that, the students will rush in. They will come thundering like a herd of buffaloes in the savannah. They'll all come rushing in and come sit right in the front. And Swami will come speak to them, everything, and he'll go in. And I was like, who are these guys, man? We are waiting here from long. They come thundering in the last minute, take everything, and then they go back also. You know, in inventory management, they call it LIFO, last in, first out. They're the last to come in, the first to get out, and they get the best everything. So I felt I have to become a student. I wanted to be a student. And I thought, if I become a student, my life is set. I need not do anything else. Because I'll get daily darshan, daily close darshan. Because the farthest point in the student's line is still closer than the nearest point in the devotee's line. So that's it. Any day I will be better than the devotee section. So let me try to become a student. And I became a student. And the year I became a student, Swami was in Vrindavan. We were waiting for him to come. I had this habit of writing diary entries. My first ever diary entry was the day I joined the hostel. I have written 2.5 pages of my first day in hostel. After that, I have led about 300 into 8, 2,400 or 2,500 days in hostel. I don't have such elaborate entries. Again, the first day in hostel. My first darshan of Swami, when Swami came from Vrindavan, there was a welcome, Bhangra dance. Which boy did which dance, how many dances were there, everything I have noted down. Subsequent darshans, Swami came for darshan today, Swami did this, very brief. Starts getting brief unless something special happens. Why is this? And this phenomenon is not just with Swami, it's with everything. We remember our firsts. You know, after marriage, we possibly remember our honeymoon, our golden jubilee, silver jubilee. What did you do on your 13th wedding anniversary? God knows. No idea. First I'll remember, 25th I'll remember, 50th I'll remember. It's like that. With anything. I'm fascinated. I want to travel abroad. I want to go to the United States. When I go for the first time, keep shooting photo, everything. The dustbin is awesome. The road is superb. Everything is so different. I'm telling this again. All of this is from personal experience. Singapore, when I went first time, everything felt photograph worthy. After that, I've been there twice. I don't have that many photographs. Why I was thinking of all this is, this continued even after Swami's physical departure, you know. A phenomenon, a miracle began to happen at home. A miracle wherein Vibhuti will come from Bhagwan's photograph. I very clearly remember the first time ever it happened. On the 24th of April 2012. No, it was the first Aradhana Mahotsavam. And I was in a confused state. I was wondering, how can you call this a Mahotsavam? Mahotsavam means grand festival. So in my mind, the question was, what are you celebrating? Are you celebrating Swami's departure from the physical? How can you call it a Mahotsavam, Aradhana Mahotsavam? It didn't make sense at all. I was not in a festive mood. I was in a very sad mood. And I was thinking, oh my God, it's my duty to go to Mandir because I have got to do some work. You know, as part of my duties in Radio Sai, So that's why I'm forced to go to mandir. All this I was feeling. Went there to the mandir. The program was there. After the program, we returned home. It was 10:15 or 10:30. Feeling a little tired, I just collapsed on the sofa. My wife went to our room to change. My mother went to their room to change. My mother, everyone was tired. It was my mother's voice I heard first. Arvind! She shouted. I thought she had fallen. I rushed in. She had not fallen. She was standing with her jaw dropped open and pointing to a photograph on Swami's wall. And when I looked at that photograph, it was covered with vibhuti. I felt, oh wow. Even as I was, allowing this miracle to sink in, it was the first time I was witnessing something like this in my own home. Arvind, I heard once more. My wife now. Did she fall? No, I don't think she'll fall. Anyway, I rushed there now. Same pose. Standing, jaw drop open, pointing to a photograph. That photograph also got vibhuti. And I told her, hey, mom also said the same thing. So now Pooja goes to my mom to exchange notes with her. And next, Amma, Pooja, I shout out. Because down there we have kept Naivedyam for Swami. In that there is vibhuti. They come to see, oh, fantastic. There was great joy in the house. We were so thrilled. We felt so amazed. That too, it's happening on that day. And for me, it felt like a message from Swami, where Swami was saying, you celebrate this day because it is on this day that I have moved from Yajur Mandiram to Hridaya Mandiram. I have moved from my residence there to everybody's heart. I am now available. Wherever you call me, where you think of me, don't think I'm gone. Because something very unique about Swami is the vibhuti. The vibhuti, the handkerchief, just like we associate the peacock feather to Krishna, the Kodanda bow to Rama, like that the handkerchief and vibhuti is something very special to Swami. So, on that day getting vibhuti at home, it was as if Swami was saying, you need not go anywhere in your home. Before you used to come to see me, now I'll come wherever you are. So it was amazing. But that was just the beginning. Because after that, for a period of about 2 or 3 years, so many times, vibhuti, kumkum, haldi, chandan, all this started coming at home. Now it has stopped. But it came for 2-3 years. At least some 120 times it has materialized. But if you ask me again, 56th what was the materialization? I have no idea. I have taken photos. Before I used to take photo and document it. I have documented about 40 or 50 of them. Because other times, again those 40-50 that I have documented are unique ones. On one occasion a silver pendant of Ganesha came. On one occasion the vibhuti was sweet to taste. On one occasion 5 colors of kumkum came. Orange, bright red, crimson. So something unique. Then I have documented them with photographs. Some other days, photo is there, vibhuti came. Okay, vibhuti came, that's it. The same vibhuti which had come on the 24th of April 2012, which made us jump out of our skins and celebrate, make 100 phone calls, tell the whole world, wow, you know what. 40 times later, vibhuti comes and, vibhuti came, okay. And I'm talking to my sister on the phone. Hey, by the way, Shruti, vibhuti had come. Hey, you didn't tell only. Yeah, it came. It came in the morning. Today morning it came. That's what had happened, Otherwise it was like, immediately it has to be conveyed. Why am I narrating multiple such incidents is because this is the nature I feel of the mind. The mind and the senses, they constantly seek entertainment in variety. We get bored of the same thing. Because we have the mind. This has been my analysis, We cook food. We have such variety of food. I tell for example, my favorite food is the masala dosa, I tell. And somebody makes masala dosa, I feel, wow, awesome. But you start giving me masala dosa for breakfast, lunch and dinner for 1 week in a row, If you give me masala dosa, after that I feel possibly you don't like me. That's why you're giving it to me. Why? Because I have a mind. The Nilgai or the Sambar deer or the spotted deer doesn't tell that, hey, same grass you're giving. I see that next to Chaitanya Jyoti, there are those deer. For them, grass is grown in the parallel road to Chitravati there. There are 2 fields where that grass is grown. Same grass. 2 times a day, 365 days a year they come and put. And every time that cart comes, on a few occasions I have taken my daughter there to show the deer. So when that cart comes with that grass, you should see them, how they come rushing, Oh, food! And they come. And they eat that grass with great relish. Same grass, over and over and over and over again. And I was thinking the relish and the joy that these deer have for grass, I don't have that relish even for grace. Because the 40th time the vibhuti comes, vibhuti came. Because the deer doesn't have a mind, I have a mind. A mind that goes along with my senses and says, this is good, I want variety, this is nice. Same thing you're wearing. I feel that is one reason possibly. All this again I say is my thoughts. I feel that is the reason why Swami said, you wear white and white. It's so boring, Swami. So much color is there. No, but because it's part of subduing the mind. And so I feel, just like I get bored of the food I eat, I get bored of the toys I play with, I get bored of, the vehicles. If I can afford, I buy a bike, 3 years later I want a new bike, I want a new phone, I want a new watch. A phone that I celebrated as the best. This is the best. This is awesome. For the next 1 year, that's all. After that, I'm not happy with it. All this is because the mind wants variety. And so, if I'm doing sadhana to entertain my senses and mind, then possibly I'll get bored of my sadhana as well. See, it is true. We may say that we are doing sadhana for whatever purpose. Sadhana is also entertaining. That's why, some of us who are musically inclined will say, I don't know how bhajans, I just love it. That's because of music, man. Simple as that. Animals also appreciate music. Music is the language of the soul. Even though I'm from Germany, I can appreciate Carnatic music, though I don't understand anything. Because I resonate with the music. Music entertains me. If I am a Rajasic person, target oriented, I may enjoy seva. Because it feels awesome at the night when I think that 2,532 people could be given food and blankets today. Wow. It's just like what I'll do in a corporate office, I'm doing here also. And it gives me satisfaction. Any sadhana, meditation when we do, there is a joy that the mind gets. There is some sensual joy we derive. From any kind of sadhana we do. A part of it is there. When the Ganesh Chaturthi festival comes, so many children rejoice. I don't think they're looking at it as a pathway to go to God. They just love it. A beautiful idol comes, there is happiness, there is so much of food, the smell of the agarbatti, it is so pleasing to the nose, it's a holiday in school. All of these factors together, make you just say, I love Ganesh Chaturthi. I need not be spiritual to love Ganesh Chaturthi. It's like another carnival. I love to go to Disneyland. I love Ganesh Chaturthi. I love to play on my video game. Because all of them give some joy to my mind and senses. So also I feel if I am doing my sadhana to give joy to my mind and senses, there is a great danger of me getting bored. And I feel that is what happened with me. When I look at it, I'll give a speech. I make a video. And in order to make this speech and make this video, I have to research. I will read Swami's literature. If I look deeper into it, why am I enjoying doing this? Possibly because at the end of it, somebody will come and tell, oh, what you spoke, man. Awesome. Just give a pat on my back. A pat on the back can make your head swell up. Somehow strangely neurological connection it is there. They'll hit here and it'll swell here. You feel awesome. It gives you a high. Some people get a high by smoking, some by drinking, some by gambling, some by speaking maybe. Maybe I'm getting my high by speaking, that's all. Because I saw this happening. If it is about Swami's teachings, I can read Swami's books every day, right? I wanted to confirm my thesis, my hypothesis. I saw when I stopped making my videos, when I stopped speaking, when I stopped writing, I'm suddenly feeling spirituality is boring. And I realized, oh my God, what has happened to me? I have equated spirituality as talks, and nothing wrong in giving talks, but if I think that that is spirituality, that is my growth, and I don't get joy without it, it is dangerous. Because again, that's an external dependence. If for me to feel happy, I need 1,000 others to say, your thoughts are beautiful, it's amazing, wow, life-changing, and I feel happy. One of my colleagues suggested to me, he said, write an article for Swami. I said, I write all my articles for Swami. He said, then don't publish it. Write it in a paper and offer it to Swami, don't publish it. And for me, it seemed like a waste of energy. Write it and don't for what I'm writing? For Swami. That was a very, very, very provoking question. You're doing japam? Throw the japamala. Why you want to count? No, I want to do 3 malas. Why you want to do 3 malas? God knows how to count. He'll keep a count of how much you're doing. Why you want to keep a count? I want to keep a count because, at the end of 1 year, I want to offer 10 crores. Why? Offer how much ever, no? Why you want to keep a count? Numbers. In corporate, they'll go for profits and sales, and I am here going for number of rosaries. That's all. Number of views, number of likes my video is getting, number of comments, number of positive comments, negative comments. This is what life becomes. And Swami says, you will get bored of this. Because all this is giving joy to your mind and senses. You are deluding yourself into thinking you are doing sadhana. Possibly that is the reason why these sages and saints went to a forest. Because lion and tigers won't come and tell, hey, awesome, how you are sitting, great you are. They won't do all that. So there's no chance to cater to my ego and senses. I'm just cut away. There's nobody to tell me that you're doing right, you're doing awesome, you're great, nothing. I want to ensure that the joy that I'm feeling is not because of the pleasure of the senses and the mind. And so these sages and saints who go to the forest, go to the next step also. They cut off all those things that gives joy to the senses and the mind. Say, I'll eat the same fruits, roots and tubers. Whatever I get, I'll eat. Wherever I get water, I'll drink. I will stay on the rocks and the mud. Nothing. The body, the senses and the mind must say, oh God, this is so terrible. In such a scenario, if I'm feeling joy, I can be sure that this joy is not because of the joy, pleasure of the senses, mind and body. Again, this is my thought. That is possibly why they go like that. Because Swami says, you need not punish the mind and body to get spiritual growth. That is what even Gautam Buddha realized. It is said that he kept fasting, didn't eat anything. He was fasting so much. Till a lady by name Sujata comes and offers him milk. He drinks the milk and the joy that he gets. And then he says, no, maybe I'm doing it wrong. I need not starve my body like this. That's why he came up with the middle path. Don't go to the extremes. Don't overeat, don't starve. Don't relax too much, don't stress yourself too much. Because it is not like that. The body has to be catered to because it is a boat that has been given to cross this ocean of samsara. Till you cross the ocean, you need the boat. Don't tell, I'll make hole in the boat, I don't care, I want to go to the other side. You make hole in the boat, you will sink in the samsara. Swami would say, take care of the body so that you can focus on things other than the body. If your body is sick, how can you think of God? You'll be constantly thinking of your body only. Same holds true with the mind. If the mind is sick and not fine, if it is diseased, you'll be thinking of the mind only. A mind disease is this, what Swami says, Kama, Krodha, Lobha, Moha, Mada, Matsarya. when those diseases afflict the mind, I am in those thoughts only. I can't think of God. So take care of the body and mind so that you don't have to think of the body and mind. But then that I feel is not sadhana. Sadhana should not be to satisfy the mind and senses. Of course, I can get attracted to sadhana using this. That is why possibly Swami allows for all of this. Meditation, yes. Seva, yes. Bhajan, yes. Depending on your inclination, your aptitude, your likes, your dislikes, come in some way. But then grow beyond it. That is why Swami has given the 9-point code of conduct where everything is included. Meditation is a part of it. Service activity is part of it. Bhajan is part of it. Because though you may get attracted to the spiritual path because of one of these things, you do all of these. Because spirituality is not about what we do. To a certain extent, it is about how we do it. And to a great extent, it is about why we do it. Why we do what we do. And that why, I feel, let me share one example. One of our senior brothers from college, he settled in Canada. So one day I was here and I was actually making a video on Swami. I made the video. I was about to publish it. Publish the video. But then there were things happening around. I was in a very upset state of mind. After this video is published, this brother pings me from Canada. And he tells, Arvind, it's 3 o'clock in the morning and I'm not getting sleep. And in my mind, I'm thinking it's just 5 in the evening and I feel like going to sleep. He says, I'm so far away in Canada, but I'm remembering Swami so much. It's 3 in the morning, I'm not getting sleep, only tears are flowing down my eyes thinking of Swami. I don't know what to do, am I mad? And when he said that, I got tears in my eyes. I was thinking, Swami, I'm sitting in Prashanti Nilayam. It's 5 in the evening. Bhajans are going to start. Vedam is going to happen. Everywhere it is you. And yet I'm not thinking about you. You're so far away from my thoughts. Am I lucky or is that guy lucky? So if I think spirituality is about traveling to Prashanti Nilayam, participating in the Vedam and Bhajan, I'm wrong. You can be leading a hardcore corporate life in Canada, but you are very spiritual if you're not getting sleep at night because you're blissed out thinking of Swami. I'm not getting sleep because I'm thinking of Swami. That's why I said spirituality is not about what we do. To a certain extent, it is about how we do it. To a great extent, maximum extent, it's about why I do it. If I'm keeping awake at night and crying because of my love for Swami, that is sadhana. If I'm sitting in the heart of Prashanti Nilayam right in front of the Sannidhi, singing bhajans, worried about whether I will get the other job or not, that is not sadhana. It doesn't depend on what I do, where I do, how I do. I may be singing very melodiously, loudly, clapping my hands. But my thoughts, I'm worried about that. That doesn't become sadhana. Because why am I doing it? We tell, right? Swami, please let this happen. If it happens, no, I'll take 108 pradakshina around Ganesha. Or I will break 108 coconuts in front of Ganesha. Or for 108 days continuously I will come to Prashanti Nilayam and bow down my head. In my humble opinion, it doesn't become sadhana because why am I doing it? Because I have some objective there. I have a goal. I want this, Swami, give this to me. If you give this to me, I'll do it. As if Swami is desperately waiting for me to go 108 times around him. As if Swami is so desperate that he wants 108 coconuts. All the coconuts in the world belong to him. Now, that's why I feel it is so funny to tell, I'll offer you coconut. Lord, let me get this 10 lakh rupee contract. I will give you 108 coconuts. First of all, we think God is a businessman. On top of that, we think that he's a foolish businessman. Why should I give you 10 lakh for 108 coconuts? For 1,000 rupees, I can buy 108 coconuts from the market, right? Why should I give you 10 lakhs? Let's reverse the deal. Imagine if Swami says that. Let's reverse the deal. You get me 10 lakhs, I'll break 108 coconuts for you. No. That is not sadhana. We say we've taken a vratam. If this happens, if a child is born, I will go and do that. That can't be sadhana. Because I'm doing it with some worldly goals and objectives in mind which give joy and pleasure to my senses and mind. That's all. That too temporarily. How many times have we felt that if I pass this exam, that's it. If I get this job, my life is set. If I marry this girl, my life is done. If I marry this person, this boy, my life is set. If I get a child, my life is done. And it happens also. But our life is not done. We find new things to find which we can tell that, Swami, if this is done, then my life is done. Because worldly joys are temporary only. And when I'm doing anything to achieve them, it doesn't become sadhana. And if it is such goal-oriented, naturally you'll get bored. If the goal is not achieved, you will get irritated and bored because, hey, how much I'm doing, nothing is happening. I had one lady actually tell me this. Arvind, you said if you surrender, Swami will take care of everything. Yes. 2 years back I have surrendered and 2 years over, still my daughter is not married. Now what should I do? So I was saying, Auntie, what is surrender, Auntie? Not that I practice surrender, but theoretically at least surrender means, yeah, whatever happens is good for me. Swami knows the best. But come on, how my daughter not getting married can be good for me? That's what it is. If you're telling that I'm going to surrender for the next 2 years, 3 months and 22 days, after that my surrender will end, that is not surrender at all. I have just deluded myself into thinking that I have surrendered. And I'm thinking for 2 years I have done this sadhana and this ratam. It is not sadhana at all. Normal people will go out and search possibly for a bride or a groom, or search for a job, or try to get medical treatment. That effort you're sitting and doing in front of God. And you're thinking it is sadhana. It is not. It is just effort being put in another way, that's all. We are deluding ourselves into thinking that I am doing sadhana for 2 years. No. Because sadhana is only for and out of love for God. Simple. Many times when I think of Swami and narrate Swami's incidents, go back in time to those beautiful memories, I see myself choking up in tears. So again, this also I analyzed, When I'm narrating Swami's incident, why am I choking up in tears? Is it tears of bliss? Partially, yes. But when I analyze myself, I realize that every time I'm thinking of the past and narrating Swami's incident, half of me is happy, half of me is sad because Swami is not there. I remember after Swami left in 2011, I decided I'll never go to the mandir. Because the mandir is a sacred place that holds so many beautiful memories for me. And I can't go and see one marble structure there instead of that beautiful form in orange with that curly mop of hair which is gently sways in the breeze. Those bright eyes that look at you, look through you, look into you, into the deepest recesses of your heart. That form, seeing which, somehow, that is what I miss. See, even now I'm feeling a little sad. Because I feel, whatever be the pressure, tension I used to have, I would just go and, once you just look at that face, you feel, fine. At least for that time, it's all forgotten. Now I think, was that a spiritual experience? People do the same with alcohol. When they're drowned in misery and sorrow, they just go drink one bottle and they forget everything. I have replaced alcohol with Swami. If that is what I have done, then that is not sadhana. That is also something I'm satiating my mind and senses with. That is why when I think of Swami now and narrate and I feel sad, the happy part is because of my love for Swami. The sad part is because of the attachment. Both are there. I'm not saying that I don't love Swami. I love Swami so much. But I can sadly also not say that I'm not attached to Swami. I'm attached to that form so much. That's why I don't feel the joy when I see Rama's photo there. If I see Swami's photo, I'll feel the joy. Because of my attachment. Simple as that. And all said and done, attachment is something that caters to the mind and senses. As long as it is there, it cannot be spiritual. Because spirituality is only of love for God. Only love for God. As I said, I had decided I won't go to the mandir. But then I knew that sometime or the other I'll have to go to the mandir because it will be part of my duty. So one morning as I was walking to my workplace, I heard bhajans going on. And I thought, okay, today let me just go in. Let's see what happens. I walked into the mandir and the students were there seated. It was morning, so all the students from the university had not come. Only a few of the students were there singing bhajans. I went and joined them. But even as I sat there, I saw the samadhi there and I began to feel sad. I began to cry. I cried and cried. The next bhajan, I remember, it was Sai Hamara Hum Sai Ke Aisa Prem Hamara. That bhajan came and I began to cry. Again, after that, which bhajan I don't remember. That's what I said, we remember only because we want the variety. Some unique experience we remember. So I was crying and crying, and after that it was only crying till Aarti. Aarti got over and I came out. But somehow, even in the worldly sense, I have noticed that when I cry for Swami, it's very relieving. It feels very good. It feels like, something has been cleansed from you. Some freshness comes back. It really feels good. That's why I feel even if I'm worldly, if I'm attached and if I have to cry, let me cry for Swami. Because among the different kinds of crying for Swami is very liberating, very awesome. Doing anything for God is superb. If I have to love anybody, let me love Swami. If I have to cry, let me cry for Swami. Because it's very liberating. It feels very nice. Before I was under this wrong impression that, boys and men should not cry in humbug, nothing like that. It's awesome to cry. It feels very good for me. General saying is that men should not cry. But my experience is that crying is very beautiful. So I cry. Because I want to go by my experience. I felt very nice. Because I felt crying for Swami is very good. Something. It was a good feeling. So I called up my fiancée. We had just been engaged. I was not yet married. She was working in Bombay. And she was working the night shift. So I knew that she would get up late in the morning. Around 9:30 or 10. Which is perfect when the bhajan gets over. So I called her and I said, you won't believe what happened today. Sorry, I didn't call her. She only called me. She said, you won't believe what happened today. I said, you also won't believe what happened today. She said, let me tell first. Now, what happened? I got Swami's dream. Oh, wow. Again, I felt how lucky she is, sitting in Bombay there, working in a corporate office, getting Swami. And I'm sitting here in the heart of Prasanthi Nilayam, missing Swami. She said, Swami came in my dream. He held my hand and said, come, let's go for bhajans. We walked into the Kulwant hall. Only about 25 people were sitting and singing bhajans. Okay. And you were also seated there among them. Oh, wow. Okay. But you know what? Everybody singing bhajan, you are crying. I don't know for what. And Swami pointed that out and started laughing and telling, look at that fool. He's not able to see me. He doesn't know that I'm here and he's crying. He's thinking I'm not here. So I said, Pooja, you got this dream now? She said, yeah. Are you sure? I said, yeah, I'm sure. No, 100% sure. I said, why on earth should I lie to you? 100% I'm sure. I said, because I went to mandir today, Pooja. I went to the mandir today. Oh, you went to mandir today? Because as I said, for months before that, I had not gone to the mandir. Yeah, I went and you know what? There were only 25 people singing bhajan. And I sat there, I couldn't sing bhajan. I missed Swami so much, I cried and cried and cried. I cried throughout, and just now I'm coming out of the bhajan. She said, this happened today? I said, yes. Really, it happened today? Yeah. Are you 100% sure? Yeah, why? It was her chance to get stunned and amazed. So basically, why am I crying? Because my senses and my mind is not able to perceive Swami, that's all. So when I think of Swami, if I am feeling joy, that is because of my love for Swami. That is my sadhana for Swami. If I am feeling sorrow, as I said, this is my opinion, I feel it is because of my attachment. Because I want to touch his hand, that feeling I get when I touch his hand. And that I'm not going to get, so I'm feeling sad. Swami would point out this, like in the name of sadhana, in the name of love, how we exhibit our own selfishness, We don't realize. In the name of love for Swami, in the name of sadhana for Bhagwan, we give expression to our own selfishness. And Swami would very gently point it out now and then. I remember one occasion, I think it was 2005 or 2006. Swami had his fall and Swami was confined to the wheelchair. And those were the days when all of us would keep praying to Swami that, Swami, you should walk, Swami, you should walk. Please walk, Swami, throw the wheelchair and walk. Because we have seen Swami do that to so many people. In fact, we have got video evidence. In the 1960s or 70s, Swami is seated on his throne, birthday celebrations. Different elderly couples are coming and anointing him with oil. Then Swami points out to one Westerner lady and tells, you also come and anoint. And she just smiles with embarrassment because this is a great opportunity being given to her, but she's on a wheelchair. She can't go to the stage and apply oil to Swami's hair. So in the video you can see that. So Swami gets up from his throne and starts walking towards her. And the person holding the bowl of oil thinks that, so Swami is going to bless this lady with that opportunity. So he also starts walking behind so that that oil can be given and that lady can take oil and apply to Swami's hair. But Swami walks up to her, taps her like this on her knees, holds both her hands and raises her, then holds her one hand, and it's a miracle in daylight for all to see. She walks up holding Swami's hand onto the stage and then applies oil, anoints Swami with oil. We have seen these things happening. In fact, Professor Kasturi records in the Satyam Shivam Sundaram that in a village in either Andhra or Tamil Nadu, I forget, Swami was giving his discourse and suddenly he begins to interact with the audience and picks out one boy and says, boy, what's your name? And the people who know this boy are horrified because this boy has been deaf and mute since birth. See, anybody who is born deaf automatically also become mute because they can't learn the language. We learn language by hearing. If I can't hear, I can't learn how the sound is made. That is how our senses are linked, and that is the miracle we don't understand only. Anybody who is born deaf automatically becomes mute because they don't know how to use the tongue. So this boy is a mute. And Swami is asking him, what's your name? And then it happens. Goosebumps to everybody in the gathering. Because this boy shouts out, Venkatramudu. Whoa, everybody shocked. He shouts out his name. And Professor Kasturi writes that next day, from the host's house, Swami had to sneak out from the back door and go away because near the front door there was a line of handicapped people, deaf, dumb, mute, blind, limping. Everybody had lined up. We don't know why God does what He does. But we know what is His capacity. And that is why we would pray to Swami, Swami, you have done this for so many. You get up and walk. Swami, please get up and walk. So on this occasion, Swami was interacting with all of us in the bhajan hall. And Swami was very happy with what we had done. So he was in a very benevolent mood, if God can have moods. He was in a good mood, and this is the time. See, basically, we humans think of God as we think of ourselves. Yad bhavam tad bhavati. Yanta matramuna evaru talachina anta matrame neevu. Whatever we are, we think of God also like that. If you ask a buffalo to describe God, the buffalo will tell the Lord is a massive, magnificent buffalo with the biggest horns and the longest tail and the most powerful hooves. That is the buffalo's concept of God. That's why when we draw our God, we draw him like us with very powerful muscles, having 10 hands, because I can do it with 2 hands, he can do it with 10 hands. I can think this much, he can think more, so 4 heads. Basically a slightly grander version of ourselves we think of God as. That's why possibly our concept of God doesn't define God, it defines us actually. It shows us who we are. What I think of God is a reflection of what I think of myself. The grander my concept of God, the grander is my concept of myself. So also, just like, we think before going, before you approach your teacher or your boss, you ask, hey, he's in good mood. She's in a good mood, right? Then I know I can go and get, if some marks in an examination paper, teacher is in good mood. He has fought somewhere and come, no need, simply. I know I won't get marks. So we think of Swami also like that, that Swami has good mood and bad mood. So that day he was in a good mood, it felt. And so one of my classmates, he got up and said, Swami, we have only one desire, Swami, can you fulfill that? Swami said, sure, tell me what. He said, Swami, please get up and walk, Swami. Please get up and walk, Swami. And saying it 2-3 times, he broke down there in tears. And reciprocating that, Swami was also in tears. Swami said, no, don't cry, don't cry. Wow, this was such a very emotionally charged moment. We were all silent and just witnessing it. The boy shedding tears, Swami shedding tears. Then the boy said, Swami, please get up. Swami said, why do you want me to get up and walk? Now, as I said, just because he walks with us, talks like us, and lives with us, we think of him as one among us. Let us realize that the descent of God is for the ascent of man. Let us not bring him down to our level because he has come to our level. He has come to our level so that we can go to his level. So once in a while, Swami will part the veil and show the reality. Show the reality, show our own reality. And at that moment, all of us thought how noble we are. What a selfless and loving prayer. We want nothing, Swami. We just want you to walk. And Swami wanted to burst that bubble. So he asked, why do you want me to walk? And we said, Swami, you are in so much pain. That's why we want you to walk. Swami said, Bangaru, dear ones, if you think I'm in pain, let me assure you I'm not in pain at all. I have no suffering at all. I'm absolutely fine. So no need for me to walk, right? I mean, that was the unsaid part. So there's no need for me to walk. Now this boy got stumped, but he recovered quickly. He said, Swami, you are God, Swami. You will not have pain and suffering. Swami, seeing you like this, we are in pain, we are suffering, Swami. So you walk. Swami's face became serious. Swami said, hey, selfish. Because you are in pain, I must walk. He stumped him that way also. Both, striker and non-striker, both ends the batsman got out. Because Swami is saying, if you want me to walk because I am in pain, let me assure you I am not in pain. If you want me to walk because you are in pain, isn't that selfishness? I have broken my hip and you want me to walk simply so that you are not in pain, seeing me walk. What if I tell you that while walking I get pain? That's why I want to sit like this. So we had no answer to give Swami. That is when we realize, the difference between our attachment and love. And most of the time towards Swami, towards our sadhana, it's only our attachment coming. We do bhajan with a purpose, we do it with a goal. In fact, ideally, when I do sadhana, even moksha should not be my goal. Like they say, if I have a desire that I should be desireless, that is also a desire. But it is better than other desires. To have the desire that I should be desireless, is better than having any other desire. In the similar way, having a goal as moksha or reaching the Lord's feet is better than other goals, that's all. But even that is not needed. I am doing it out of love for Swami. Hanuman is such an example for us. Multiple ways. It is said that Hanuman had written a Ramayana. And this is a legend that when Tulsidas came and read the Ramayana written by Hanuman, it is said that Tulsidas was in tears. And he said, Hanuman, what you have written, Hanuman? And Hanuman said, okay. Tulsidas said, once people read your Ramayana, nobody is going to read my Ramayana. Instantly Hanuman takes and tears it up. He says, I didn't write it as a competition for you. I have not written it with the desire that people should read it. I wrote it for my Lord. It has reached the Lord enough. And when I read about this legend, I thought, do I have the guts to tear up all the books I have written, all the articles I have written? Can I just unpublish and tell no need? I wrote it for my Lord. I don't care whether people read. No, I can't. Then how can it be my sadhana? Naturally, I'll get bored. Because I'm doing it to satiate my mind and desires. I cannot, even now I don't have the courage to go and just delete my blog. No. How many people will get impacted? How many people will feel love for Swami for that? No, I'm camouflaging my selfishness as Jagadodharana. Does the world need me to emancipate? God can emancipate the world when He wants. I feel, no, He needs. My articles are necessary. My videos are necessary. They're not. That's possibly the reason for some time I was in a kind of flux. Again, I've got back. Today I have published another video. Hopefully I have improved. Hopefully I am doing it as a sadhana. Yes. See, compared to Hanuman, possibly this is Tulsidas, but definitely Tulsidas did it as an expression of his love for Rama. Tyagaraja did not write Kritis thinking that for 1,000 years to come, this should become the syllabus for Carnatic music. No. He just sang out in his love for Rama. Mirabai didn't think that, years to come, people should take my songs and use it as an expression of their devotion to Krishna. No. It was just her expression. That will automatically come. Yes, that will happen. When there is something inspiring and there is something of love for God in it, it will reach anybody who is thirsting for that love of God. But that should not be the objective of sadhana. Of course, I am not saying that in those articles, in those videos, in those talks, love for Swami is not there, it is there. Because if love for Swami is not there, it won't touch any heart. But it is not just purely love for Swami alone. There are so many other things mixed over there. Can I purify it out? It is definitely time for me to begin that purification process because I felt bored of sadhana. The why, as I said, sadhana is not about what we do. It's about why we do. And the why of sadhana is for love of God. I am doing it just out of love for God. Even this question was once asked, how do I get love for God? People, when you give a talk or when you interact, there are some who ask, I want to love Swami, yes. How do I love Swami? Very difficult answer. I don't know. How do you love your mom? How do you love anybody that you love? No, my mom stays with me. I love her. Correct. How do you love Sachin Tendulkar? How do you love Diego Maradona? How do you love Shah Rukh Khan? How do you love Tom Cruise? You don't talk to them, right? You don't interact with them, right? Yeah. Because I love the work. I love their work. When they replied like this, I got my answer. I said, yes. So if you feel that right now you're not able to contact Swami directly, go to Swami's work. Start loving his work. Have you read the Satyam Shivam Sundaram? Have you read the Vahinis that Swami has written? Swami's 8,000 discourses are available online in the text form. 1,000 are available in the audio form. Have you heard all of them? And then how do you say, how? I have to put effort. I have to cultivate this love. I have to cultivate this love. Any love is cultivated. Love at first sight is a glorified name for lust at first sight. That's all. Because many love at first sight cases end up in marriages which lead to fights and divorces. What happened to love? It was not love, it was just attraction. Whether it's a in-court arranged marriage or in-court love marriage, love has to be cultivated. And it is cultivated through sacrifice, through understanding. So much of sacrifice. Having gone through 7 years of married life, I feel, oh my God, how much? How many misunderstandings? How many fights? But every time we remind each other that no, we are partners in our journey to Swami, so we have to go together. Separation, divorce, these are not options. We make sacrifices, we make adjustments. So too it is with God. We might think that, some people, as a child itself, he used to love Krishna. Mirabai, as a little girl, she loved Krishna. She was lucky. No, she was not lucky. She possibly put in that effort in her previous birth. That's all it is. There is no free meal. It is a love that has to be cultivated. You have to put effort, you have to make sacrifice. As Swami would say, na karmana na prajaya dhane na tyage na ke amrutatva manushu. It is by sacrifice alone that you can reach that immortality. Na karmana, not through action, na prajaya, not through your influence, dhanena, not through your wealth or status, nothing of that matters. The sacrifice you make for that. Love is not love without sacrifice. You have to give up something for that. Because when you sacrifice, why do you give up something for another? You give up something for another because you feel that another is more valuable than this. So when I give up money for Swami, when I give up food for Swami, when I give up whatever I give up for Swami, I'm doing it because I'm feeling Swami is more valuable than this. If I don't do that, whether I accept it or not, unconsciously I feel Swami is not as valuable as that. Swami is not first priority. If God is not first priority, He is no priority at all. That's all it is. That is why I get possibly bored in my sadhana. One simple technique that has worked for me is, whenever I feel that love for Swami in my heart has dried up, what I do is I just sit in front of him and tell him, Swami, please let me love you. Please fill my heart with love for you. Please not let that love that you fill in my heart not get diluted or polluted with anything else. And it has worked. It has worked for me. It has worked. You feel good after that. I feel, why not? We sit in front of Lord and say, Swami, please let this marriage happen. Swami, please let me get this job. Swami, please save this person's life. Swami, please let this disease get cured. We pray intensely like that. And I wonder, have I any time prayed intensely asking, Swami, please fill my heart with love for you. And this is actually what I answered that person who asked me also. He said, I want to love Swami, but I'm not able to. What should I do? Tell Swami no. Tell Swami, Swami, I want to love you. Fill my heart with love for you. Swami would in fact sing it so beautifully. I would not, scare you by singing it. But in Telugu, Swami would sing the poem that the Gopikas would sing for Krishna. They would say, Krishna, we have nothing to offer to you other than our hearts, which is also your gift only to us. Please accept. What you have given us, we are giving it back to you in an unsullied and pristine condition. Please accept it. This is our offering to you. And I feel that's all we can do. And I feel when this we do know, whether I publish article or not, whether I go to bhajan or not, I will not feel bored. Because everything I do, it will be so vibrant because it's being done out of love for Swami. Whether I speak in the satsang hall, or I speak to a person on the road, or I listen to somebody else speaking, whether I'm cooking, whether I'm eating, whether I'm bathing, Swami would say that. He would tell the ladies that when you're cutting vegetables, when you're cutting lady's finger, think that I'm chopping my own ego because I'm offering it to Swami. Think that I'm cooking a meal for God. When you take bath, think that this is a temple and you're doing abhishekam. That I feel is a symptom of a person who is truly in love with God. Then whatever is done becomes sadhana. Because I would like to conclude with the same statement I made in the middle of the talk, which is sadhana is not about what we do. It's about why we do it. And the sole reason for any sadhana is to get love for God. In fact, this was a debate that came up during the summer course, during one of the summer courses. Very interesting question. It is said in the Bhagavad Gita that yada yada hi dharmasya glaner bhavati bharata abhyutthanam adharmasya tada atmanam srujamyaham. Meaning, whenever there is a decline in dharma, I come again from age to age to uplift this dharma. The question that came up was, see, in Treta Yuga, we consider usually, right, Krita Yuga is the golden age, then the Treta Yuga, then the Dwapara Yuga, and then the most terrible, horrible age we are in, which is Kali Yuga. So in Treta Yuga, Lord Rama came. After that, what happened? Did Dharma get Sthapana? Did Dharma get uplifted? If Dharma got uplifted, after Treta, it should have again become Krita Yuga, right? No. It was a downgrade. It became Dwapara Yuga. So then now, Purna Avatar, Paripurna Avatar came, Lord Krishna. What did he do? Did he raise it back at least to Treta level? No. He further downgraded to Kali level. So what is this Dharma that you are uplifting? This was the discussion that happened. And beautifully Swami answered it in the next day's discourse without anybody asking this question. Swami himself brought up this subject. Swami quotes this shloka and Swami says, what is the dharma that the Lord comes to uplift? And there are so many meaningful glances exchanged in the audience because they are like, this is the same question we had. Swami says in that discourse that it is not the day-to-day dharma that you talk about, Stri dharma, Purusha dharma, Brahmacharya dharma. There are so many dharmas. None of that the Lord touches. The Lord comes to resurrect only Atma dharma, which is Prema Dharma, Swami said. Swami said he comes to build back that connect of love between the devotee and the Lord. That's all. Everything else is only props in the drama. That's all. Nothing else matters. The Lord comes again and again whenever there's a decline of love for God to build back love for God. That's all. Nothing else. Mahabharata Yuddha took place then. Now also war is happening. Swami has come physically and gone. The world is still in the same chaotic state. People still fight. But one thing for sure, I don't know about others' heart. My heart definitely has much more love for God than it would have ever had Swami not come. And I'm sure many of you, all of you, will be able to say that. Because that is the dharma he comes to resurrect. Because that is the only sadhana that we need to do. Build love for God. And as Swami says in the Dharma Vahini, I'll conclude with this. I swear I'll conclude with this. In Dharma Vahini, Swami says, people think that Kala or time determines Dharma. We say, what to do? Kali Kalam. Kali Yuga, it is very bad times. All bad things happen. Swami says, no. Kala doesn't determine Dharma. Instead, Dharma determines Kala, Swami says. Swami says, in the same time period, there was Hiranyakashipu and Prahalada. It was the worst of times for Hiranyakashipu. It was the best of times for Prahalada. So, it doesn't matter which yuga they are in. If you have love for God, it becomes the golden age. If there's no love for God, instead if there's hatred for God, it becomes the Kali Yuga, it becomes the worst age. So, that is the reason we decide our own destiny when they say, depending on whether I have love for God or not, I decide whether it is Krita Yuga for me or Kali Yuga for me. So that, in conclusion, is what I arrived at after these many months and weeks of thinking and pondering, that if I am feeling bored of my sadhana, it is because my sadhana is catering to my senses and mind. The only sadhana is not what I do or how I do, but why I do it. As long as I do anything because of love for Swami and for Swami to see, nothing else will matter. I'll never get bored. It will be ever vibrant, ever thrilling, ever full of joy. Thank you. Jai Sai Ram.